I thought
Heather
that,
Locklear.
yeah,
Hubba hubba,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Playing Jody Hildebrandt, that sex magnet Jody Hildebrandt. No shame, but
Oh my
I,
goodness.
I just
There's the title of the episode, folks. That sex magnet.
Jody Hildebrandt. I'll make it that. I'll make it that.
Oh
That might
boy.
be
Oh
that might be
boy.
inappropriate.
Ladies and gentlemen, kicking off the first stop on his world tour, our new president and prophet, Russell M. Nelson. You say you want some revelation. Well, here you go. It's gonna blow your freaking mind.
Breaking news from inside the Mormon Church. This affects everyone, all of humanity, so it'd probably be really important to listen. I will read exactly what this person said because I don't want to mess it up. And I need to hear your thoughts afterwards. Will this change how you live your life? Will you go back to the church? The Mormon Church, that is, the only true church. Will you repent and return? The stakes are high. Let's see what they said. In class at church, a comment hit me like a ton of bricks. The second coming of our Savior has already happened. He is already here. We have an erroneous idea of what his second coming might look like, but he has appeared to Joseph Smith multiple times, and he is already here. He is already calling the shots. So I guess the clouds and the angels and all the fanfare, it's not going to happen because Jesus is already here. I feel sort of bad that I didn't even notice.
In church news today, this Friday, October 25th, Young Women General President Emily Bell Freeman and Young Men General President Stephen J. Lunn talked about the history of the church's youth program as keynote speakers at the Church History Symposium. They said the program then and now continues to build testimonies of Jesus Christ. This week's episode of the Church News Podcast dives into BYU research on youth and temple attendance, scripture study, family prayer, and restoration beliefs led to more time in the temple, which was also associated with better mental health. 9 men and women have been called to the Sunday School General Advisory Council. They will assist the Sunday School General Presidency. The new council began serving in August and September 2024.
A man Cottonwood Heights police were searching for after he allegedly threatened several local churches has been apprehended in Wyoming. ABC4's Annika Johns joins us live from the police department with more on this developing story. Annika?
Yeah, Jordan, that's exactly right. So police have been searching for a man named Keith Barber, who they labeled as armed and dangerous after he threatened a number of local churches here in the area. Now, he is also believed to have used the alias Troy Heyer. Now, Barber is said to have called 911 earlier today, stating he was outside a Catholic church with a knife, feeling violent towards Catholics. Now, police say Barber then fled the area. Now, police advised those living here not to approach, attempt to apprehend, or follow, believing he was armed and experiencing a mental health crisis. Now, police initially released his description and vehicle information in an effort to track him down. However, about 30 minutes after police released this information, he was located and arrested in Wyoming. Now, police didn't specify where exactly in Wyoming he was arrested, but from Cottonwood Heights to Evanston, Wyoming, which is the closest town after crossing the Utah-Wyoming border, it's about an hour's drive to get there via I-80. Now, of course, we'll be keeping you updated here on air and online at abc4.com as we continue to learn more about this case and what took place earlier today.
Behind bars tonight after making threats against Catholics and members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints here in Utah.
News specialist Garna Mejia has the details now. Garna?
According to police, the man drove here all the way from California and said he wanted to start a war.
He arrived at our parish just before 8 a.m., a good hour before our first church services.
What started off with an unexpected visitor at St. Thomas More Catholic Church in Cottonwood Heights.
And then he attended the 9 o'clock Mass.
Turned scary for parishioners. Right after Mass, the man identified as 27-year-old Keith Barber called 911.
He had gone outside of the church and reported himself to the police that he had wanted to kill as many Catholics as possible. And so I think he knew he wasn't in the right frame of mind.
He's saying he feels persecuted by the Catholics. He wants to go to war. He said he had a knife.
The church was placed on lockdown.
All officers make haste to get to that Catholic church.
The suspect fled, but his phone was found in Sandy. Officers contacted Barber's family in California, and they also raised the alarm.
He has said that he left California 2 days ago, and he's going to Utah to start a war with the Catholics and the Mormons, and he's willing to die.
Police rushed to warn the public and track down the suspect. A few hours later, a sigh of relief. Authorities arrested Barber in Lyman, Wyoming.
Why did he come to Comet Heights?
Police aren't sure why Barber targeted Utah.
Maybe it's well known that the Christians in Comet Heights are well known for their faith.
But everyone is grateful for the safe outcome.
They did a wonderful job. They responded very rapidly. And then I want to commend Keith himself for calling the police.
Father Evans tells me that the church has done lockdown drills in the past, and they're grateful that parishioners knew what to do. He said that they'll take this experience and learn from it. As for Barber, he's being held in Wyoming on local unrelated charges. Now, police here in Utah are looking at what charges he could face for the incident here.
According to a new study, the differences between members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and former members of the church boils down to just 5 things. The moral foundations theory by psychologist Jonathan Haidt proposes that humans base their personal code of ethics and morals by weighing different combinations of the following values.
Author of American Zion, A New History of Mormonism, joins us today to discuss the church's temple frenzy, how it compares to the past, what it means in the present, and what it may portend for the future. Ben, welcome.
Glad to be here.
Put your historian hat on. Explain briefly how temples were viewed in the early days of the church.
Yeah, the LDS Church wasn't even a year old before Joseph Smith started dictating revelations that promised coming temples, these sacred spaces that are a bridge point between the earth and the heavens, and where humanity can converse with the divine. The notion of temples, of course, evolved over the next few years, but eventually the LDS Church built their first temple in Kirtland, Ohio, and then a much bigger temple in Nauvoo, and then, of course, started building more when they arrived in Utah, and then now have hundreds across the globe. These temples have always been a central point of Latter-day Saint faith, in part because they can participate in sacred rituals and ordinances that bring eternal meaning both to themselves and for the deceased. But they're also a symbol of their devout faith, that those temples are a sacrifice to the divine, which is why they're not just shacks. They are, ornate structures that signify how much they are committed to God's plan. What is the reasoning behind and justification for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints building so many temples right now? My name is Dr. Benjamin E. Park. I'm a scholar of American religion and author of the book American Zion, A New History of Mormonism. I was very privileged to have an essay appear this week in the Salt Lake Tribune titled LDS Church President Russell Nelson's $1 Billion Gamble, in which I speculate what's behind this building spree and what it tells us about how Nelson envisions the church maintaining its members going forward. Let's highlight some of the key ideas. Of course, temple worship has long been at the center for the Latter-day Saint experience because they believe that they perform salvific and necessary rites both for themselves and the deceased within these temple walls. And temple building has taken a much more central part of the faith in the last few decades, as financial resources and a growing membership has justified these temples dotting the globe. However, there used to be a general understanding, especially when Gordon B. Hinckley, who presided over the church in the 1990s and the 2000s, where the temple was the culmination after a community has grown sufficiently to justify the building of that temple and all the resources that would go into it. That has seemed to change in the last few years. Because when Russell M. Nelson, who recently turned 100 years old, became the president of the LDS Church in 2018, he embarked a worldwide temple building project that shocked many observers and went far beyond what previous presidents had done. He's announced 168 temples in countries across the globe. And what makes it different, rather than these temples being the culmination of these communities growing and now necessitating a temple. His goal is to place these temples in all communities, even when they don't really require them. Whereas under Gordon B. Hinckley, his goal was that all Latter-day Saints could be within a day's journey of a temple. Now it seems with Nelson that you can be within a short drive of the temple. So you have temples, a second temple being built in Dallas, a second temple being built in Houston, 30 more temples being built in Utah. What's justifying this, especially when church attendance and temple participation is actually a bit down? Well, I think one reasoning is finances. Now that the media and the general public is well aware of the church's vast financial reserves, the reasoning they gave for accruing all that money, a rainy day fund, is not really sufficient, and the church has shifted their explanation to now saying that that financial reserve justifies the building of these temples, that the thing that makes the Latter-day Saint Church unique is its ability to perform these temples with the proper authority. So now that they've accrued these astronomical financial resources, it is time to build them at a relatively fast rate. The Wall Street Journal reporter, who I've spoken to on a number of occasions, he said that he's seen a shift in the recent few years when he interviews church authorities about their reserves, and they are increasingly talking about that these reserves are going to enable us to build hundreds, if not thousands, of temples. So I think that's one reasoning. But for the broader answer, I think we need some context, because America right now is dealing with a wave of especially younger generation of Americans who are disaffiliating with religious institutions, with the rise of those who identify as nones or have no religious affiliation. The LDS Church, of course, is far from immune from this, as they are also dealing with members leaving the fold. And so LDS church leaders, just like many religious leaders, are faced with the question of how can we better retain our members and make sure that they are fully committed to the institution in an era of disaffiliation. And that's where this little paper comes in. This paper, A Temple Recommend, signifies a member's full commitment to the Latter-day Saint institution, that they are in full standing. To have a temple recommend means that your ecclesiastical leaders have granted you access to the temple by deeming you worthy. To attend one of these temples, which you are expected to do, especially now that it's just down the road, you are expected to maintain a temple recommend. And to maintain a temple recommend, you have to attend church, you have to pay tithing, you have to participate in a calling, you have to be fully invested in the faith. And now that these temples are going to litter all these communities, that requires investment from those local members who are going to attend the temple, volunteer to staff the temple, lead temple trips. In other words, the more temples there are, the bigger the expectation that these members are going to have to participate in it. So in the end, I think Nelson is seeing these temples as the Mormon faith's best chance to bind their members to the denomination in the long term. Consider this the Field of Dreams corollary. Whereas the main character in Field of Dreams was told, if you build it, meaning the baseball stadium, they will come, the deceased players and eventually his own father, Russell M. Nelson is claiming to receive the revelation of, if you build them, the temples, they, the members of the faith, will remain. Now, of course, there are plenty of other reasons that can be given for this temple building spending spree. The faithful Latter-day Saints may be saying that Russell Nelson is led by revelation and God wants these houses of worship that do salvific ordinances to dot the earth, and so the more of them, the better. Others may say that Russell Nelson is trying to do a one-upsmanship over Gordon B. Hinckley, who he seems to have a rivalry with, or that building all these temples is a sense to exert prowess and dominance in an era of declining membership. All of those are probably fitting into a multilateral psyche here. It's also a big risk. It could be that decades down the road, many of these temples are going to stand empty. Remnants, testaments to an overextension and a period where the church should have been consolidating. And there's still, of course, the question of whether younger Latter-day Saints who are inclined to be anti-institutional and in many ways not as committed to these types of rituals, whether this is really going to be the safety harness that the Latter-day Saint Church believes. Nelson, of course, is already 100 years old. He's not going to live to see the fruits. That remains to be seen. But I do think that historians in the future will look back and see these temples as an expression of how Nelson believes the church should address the problem of disaffiliation in the modern world. Anyways, you can go read the story now at Salt Lake Tribune. I'll add a link in my link tree. You have to subscribe to the Salt Lake Tribune, which you really should because it has the best coverage on Mormonism. And for just a few dollars a month, you can subscribe to their Mormon line coverage and get all their Mormon content. It's great. Strongly recommended.
The Mormon Church is building a gazillion temples. There's people trying to figure out what that's about. Do you have any thoughts from your insider perspective on what's going on there?
The Mormon Church isn't building a lot of temples. The Mormon Church is announcing a gosh awful announcement level of temples. How many dedications are occurring each year? And it's still in that same 5 to 6 new temple range that our program was producing 15 years ago. What's happening, in my opinion, is a gross exaggeration of the number of announcements. It's not building and producing lots of new temples. It's still plugging along at the same pace it always has, which is going to create a 20 to 30 year backlog of announcements. Why are announcements taking place? There's got to be another reason.
My own guess, I have to imagine that they really can't brag on the growth of the church membership because so many active members are leaving and the missionary efforts are barely keeping pace with the declining birth rate and the people leaving. So the church is kind of flat in its growth, both with members and missionary efforts. It's just a way to project the appearance of growth, something that's exciting, something that's expanding, when it's reasonable to think that the church might be declining or contracting in other ways.
There's been online chatter recently about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints building a temple in Madison County. We now know that the church has purchased land in Madison, but as Fox 54's Caleb Aguayo tells us, the exact location and timetable are still up in the air.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints already has more than 8 congregations in North Alabama, and plans are underway to build a new temple, the second in Alabama. A land purchase for a meeting house in Madison at the corner of Powell Road and Seegers Road will be the first structure. According to documents from the city, the site will cover 6.23 acres. The exact location for the temple is yet to be determined. One possible location is at Browns Ferry and Gillespie Road, but when we asked Madison County District 1 Commissioner Steve Haraway about this, he said he didn't know, but he would look into it for us. The building of a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints temple is not a fast project. According to John Fellows, a spokesperson for the church, quote, "The temple building is all managed by the house of the presiding bishop, but it's all out of Salt Lake," end quote.
That was Fox 54's Caleb Aguayo reporting. Fellows say the site for the temple will be announced at a later date.
Now, this is a really interesting quick story, and I'm so lucky to have 2 friends that live in Belgium. One is a mutual friend, Martine, and then I have another friend there too. And they, one of them brought to my attention this article about the Brussels, Belgium temple. And there are some stats on it. It was announced in 2021. It's going to be one of those ones where they repurpose an existing building, as you can see there on the screen, and they're going to fit it into the community. There's no place they can build a standalone temple. It's going to have a meeting house in it, I think a reception area. So it'll be maybe kind of like the Manhattan Temple, where you're in a more urban area and you kind of build up, right? You got the temple on one floor, you got the meeting house. So anyway, exciting announcement. Everybody's absolutely thrilled. And then this very interesting article came out. This is by Alan Lallemond, and it is in the Gazette van Antwerp. And again, I couldn't read it, but I had friends that could. So this is great. So the article says the Mormon Church purchased this property in 2021 and in the same year applied for a zoning change to a religious and cultural center. So same MO, as we know, we have to go in and apply to change the zone so you can put your religious building in. An environmental permit for conversion to a house of worship followed on June 25th of this year. This application was rejected Did we ever hear anything about that? I don't think we ever did. I guess they don't really announce the nuts and bolts of what's happening with a temple when it's, this is the back and forth, the legal back and forth. It would not be in line with the regional zoning plan, is what they said in Brussels. The Brussels environment confirms that the procedures and negotiations are continuing correctly in accordance with the regulations of the city of Brussels, said the spokesman for the church in Belgium. So just what I said, the church says, no, this is just fine. It's back and forth. It's what normally happens. So an opening date has not been announced. So we don't know when it's going to be built. So now this is the part where it gets really interesting. The Mormon church itself claims to have 7,000 members in our country. The Observatory for Harmful Cults in Belgium, the IACSSO, calls that an overestimate. Oh dear.
The Observatory for what?
For harmful cults. It's a watchdog group that looks at organizations that are coming into the country and assesses whether they might meet the criteria of being considered something a little more harmful than just a religion. So it's called the Observatory for Harmful Cults. Anyway, so they say this is an overestimate to say there are 7,000 members there. Journalist Alain Lamond, who wrote a book on cults in Belgium, rather estimates the number at around 4,200. And if we do the math on that, that tracks with everything that we track as far as the percentages and the overestimations. The IACSSO says it keeps a close eye on the faith community. Polygamy, the organization renounced, but it still opposes abortion, contraception, and homosexuality. Church members also donate 10% of their total income. It is not known how much the investment in Brussels will cost. The Information and Advisory Center on Harmful Cultarian Organizations, Cultarian, I don't know what that is either, is an independent center established at the FPS Justice. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, we wouldn't say cultarian organizations. We would just say cults.
Yes, I think that's what we would say. Exactly. So anyway, fascinating, huh? I'm sure most of you weren't staying up at night wondering what was happening with the Belgium Brussels temple, but now we know. Looks like there's a watchdog group looking into it, and they're working on getting the correct permits. So we'll see.
When it comes to China, sort of here at least stalling out for a moment. Sort of strange that our Father in heaven would tell his prophet where to put a temple, only to find out that the chain of events would be such that maybe such an idea could be thwarted. You think the master of the universe would sort of know the end game?
Yes.
I don't know.
You would say, I have the power.
The master of the universe might have known that the location that he designated for Heber Valley would require that millions of gallons a day of water are pumped out from the land underneath the temple. There's all kinds of things. And again, this goes back to what Laura Lee Hall keeps telling us. It used to be you would do that kind of due diligence on the ground. You would choose a site. She herself was sent out to select all the sites. You look very carefully. You talk to the community. You understand what's happening. That's not what's happening now. You're just throwing out announcements. Remember the announcement about India? That just came into President Nelson's head while he was standing at the stand and said, there's going to be a temple in India. You haven't done any due diligence. And these are the kind of problems that you're going to run into. You're going to run into neighborhood pushback, and it's just going to happen over and over. So
it's really interesting because we hear it a lot. And like a lot of the grumbles are like, we need the budget to like redo our looks. And we all have had massive glow ups. I for sure have had a glow up from my season 1, but like, there's a part of me that doesn't want it to ever change, because when I see that person, I just am like so grateful to her for like having the ball sack to do that in that dress and that outfit, and to like show up and like put herself out there, not knowing what would come and not having any of the fun or the perks. Like, she didn't get to go to Australia. She just was putting on like a $100 jumpsuit and pretending to hold a snowflake, And I just can't believe how much my life has transformed. So like, it's a great reminder for me. I hope it never changes.
Well, and it is a bit of a status symbol, if you will, because all of us OGs still have our original, and as they add new people, obviously they're more current with how they look, but we all look the same, and it's like, we're the OGs. I think it's kind of cool. Come ye saints and come ye sinners,
you guys, I just found out that The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives Season 2 is coming out in like 3 days. I only got to episode 2 last time, so I guess it's time to binge. I hope my brain cells don't die.
Hey everybody, it's so nice to meet you.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. So a little backstory on me. I'm former LDS member, former LDS missionary. So first, I just want to say thank you for the years of therapy I'm going to have after seeing this film and bringing back everything. But also just, I'm so impressed with your characters and where the story went and the discussions involved in it. So my first question is to Sophie and Chloe. You have experience with the church. I know you've been members before. What was it like returning back to that mindset? And what did you want to include with your character to make them feel more grounded and realistic?
Yeah, I wanted the character, I used for reference, I just thought of my cousins. I asked my mom a lot of questions. Chloe's a lot more in touch, so I got a lot of feedback from her and just like looked up her friends. She would show me like her friends' Instagrams. And I was like, this is what a modern Mormon looks like, and it's so normal, and it like there's so many varying degrees of it. For me, it was just about like finding the right tone and the right body language and saying "oh my gosh" a lot.
Well, I had a lot of friends that were on missions while we were shooting, and even when I got the script originally, and so I was constantly asking, or like even our character dynamic, like, okay, she's the senior missionary, how long have we been together? Just like little things that I felt like helped make it as authentic as possible. And I feel like I do have a finger on the pulse. I know a lot, but I wanted to take it one step further, and even like the scriptures or the things that we were improvising, I mean, I wasn't really improvising it. I just straight up asked my friend on a mission in Texas, like, tell me what to say that you would say right now on your mission.
Right. Well, and real quick, Hugh, Mr. Reed has an encyclopedic knowledge of religion and faith. As you were diving deep into the religion, was there anything that stood out to you that you enjoyed looking into more than others?
The lecture I give about iterations and how Christianity, actually, a lot of the central tenets of Christianity are there in hundreds of religions that predate Christianity. That was new to me and fascinating. You know, the fact that lots of religions had saviors born of a Virgin Mother who were baptized in rivers, they were born on December the 25th, that's a recurring theme, and performed miracles, rose on the third day. That was not new in Christianity, and I didn't know that.
Well, and the other final question, I guess, with this...
I've said the wrong thing to Salt Lake City, haven't I?
No, not at all. In fact, I'm really excited for people to check out this movie, and I want to sell it as best I can, because to me, it feels like these are authentic characters. And Mr. Reed, even to an effect, he's not necessarily bashing the faith of the sisters. No, he's more going after the institution.
Well, yeah, he's got a theory about what religion, in the global sense, really boils down to. It's not an anti-Mormon film in any way.
I feel like every missionary kind of has a story of where they went into a house and unknowingly became in a confrontation, whether it be Bible bashing and you don't realize it, or someone that actually does know a lot about the faith that is maybe playing coy at the beginning. Do you think, where does the balance lie between giving a nuanced discussion about religion before it becomes confrontational?
I don't know. I mean, I think in Mormonism, as opposed to other churches, they want you to preach to your friends and to anyone and share to everyone, and it's very open discussion. There's no boundary or border that you cross, and I think that's also why this movie was made, because they're talking about what we're always told not to talk about, which is very Mormon. Like, it's very, spread the word.
But also, yeah, this is a piece of fiction, and I think people should just keep an open mind when going into it.
Yeah.
It's like this.
Yes.
I don't think this has never happened before.
Yeah.
It would be insane if it did. That would be on the news everywhere. Well, thank you again, everybody. It was a pleasure meeting all of you, and terrifying, personal, something that I'm going to be watching next year moving forward.
Oh, love that.
Right.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
So Netflix have announced a massive new Western TV show called American Primeval that sounds a lot like The Revenant crossed with 1883. So let's take a closer look at everything we know about the show so far, including details on its plot, when and where it's likely to release, and why it won't be an easy watch for the faint of heart. Back in 2022, it was announced that Netflix had ordered a new Western limited series straight to order from director and writer Pete Berg, best known for writing Friday Night Lights and Lone Survivor. And the name of this new Western TV show was American Primeval, an original Western drama that explores the birth of the American West, specifically the violent collision of cultures, religions, and communities of those fighting for control of the lawless, untamed frontier. And on discussing his role as a director on the series, Pete Berg said, "We are very appreciative that Netflix is trusting us to take a big swing with American Primeval. I'm looking forward to taking viewers into the most dynamic, intense, and heart-pounding survival tale humanly possible. We are going into the belly of the beast." So it sounds as if American Primeval is a show that really won't pull its punches, especially considering that it's being written by Mark L. Smith, who previously wrote the screenplay for Overlord, Twisters, and The Revenant. And what little we know about the plot so far is that the show will center around a Mormon caravan heading west that becomes embroiled in a bloody conflict with Native Americans. And amongst the caravan is Isaac, a traumatized man looking for a reason to live in a brutal world, will be played by Taylor Kitsch. Also heading out west is Sarah, portrayed by Betty Gilpin, who plays a mother that winds up joining the expedition with her son after discovering that it's traveling in the same direction that they need to go. However, these are just a few of its many characters, as American Primeval sounds very much like an ensemble show, boasting a star-studded cast that includes big names such as Jai Courtney, Dane DeHaan, and Shea Wiggum. So everything would suggest that American Primeval will be one of the most significant Western TV shows to release in quite a while, promising the same kind of brutal period-set action and drama as The Revenant in 1883. In fact, American Primeval might well be Netflix's response to the record-breaking viewership of Yellowstone, or at the very least a continuation of their success within the genre, following on from previous big hits such as Godless, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and The Harder They Fall. So if you're wondering when you'll actually be able to watch American Primeval, the show is already wrapped filming in Albuquerque, and is apparently set to premiere before the end of 2024. And when it does, the 6-episode limited series will stream exclusively on Netflix.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints released the 4th and final installment of their church history books called Saints. It's called Sounded in Every Year. It covers church history and member stories from the 1950s all the way to 2020, from new priesthood duties to mission changes to temples built all around the world, all stemming from personal stories and journal entries from church members.
Writing a book about recent history is a lot of fun because you do get to talk with and interact with living people who live these stories, who care about these stories, and of course they care about what you write.
You know, we've got 2 equally good stories, but maybe one speaks more to the theme of church growth more than maybe another one does. And so we'll choose, if we want to say more about church growth, then we're going to go with the story that speaks to that theme.
Some new stories there. Volume 4, again, it's out now. You can listen or read it for free in the Gospel Library app or the church website.
Church News Today this Wednesday, October 30th. The First Presidency announced Monday the dedication date for the Auckland, New Zealand Temple and the rededication date of the Toronto, Ontario Temple. President Jeffrey R. Holland will rededicate the Toronto Temple on March 23rd, and Elder Patrick Kieron will dedicate the Auckland Temple on April 13th, both of 2025. Elder Neil L. Anderson and his wife, Sister Kathy Anderson, shared personal perspectives at the new Tallahassee, Florida temple as local media representatives came for an introductory press conference and interviews with leaders of the church, as well as a tour of the new house of the Lord on Monday. The 2025 youth theme was announced last month. Now, additional resources have been made available for youth, their parents, and leaders. These include the logo, artwork, posters, banners, stickers, and the new music album featuring the theme of Look Unto Christ.
A national study finds that Latter-day Saints are the faith community most resilient to political division and polarization. So a new study by More in Common, but they found out that members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are the most resilient to political division and polarization. Part of the reasoning is that 90% of the church, membership of the church, believes that political discussions should not be had in religious settings.
Agreed.
Very much agreed. And they attribute that to the church's official stance of political neutrality. However, members of the church are not immune to division, but they find that happens because of social issues, not necessarily political issues, which maybe those could be different things. But issues like same-sex marriage, transgender issues can be divisive, and some members report feeling tension around them. But what's unique about Latter-day Saints is that the polarization that they experience tends to be more on a personal level, as members of the church personally reconcile their faith with those complex political and social issues. And they also believe that just our strong faith identity can help us navigate those waters and be able to, I'm going to add this, but the fact that we have an emphasis on seeing people, the people around us as children of God and not as our mortal enemies because they vote different. Is that everybody who feels that way? Probably not.
No.
But it is what we're taught. And that's exactly what President Oaks taught us in conference this weekend, that hate has no place in these discussions.
I also find that maybe inoculated is maybe not the right word towards it, but we get a little bit of it and get a little uncomfortable, where maybe other congregations, you can sort of self-select yourself into a very liberal congregation or a very conservative congregation where we're geographically determined. We don't really get to choose. So maybe there is a little bit of it where it's like, yeah, there's a little bit of everything in this ward, as opposed to you conservative folks, you're going to go to this one over here. And there's no place for you here. I wonder how much of that is part of it as well. I will tell you this, though. Whenever someone names someone that's running for something within a church setting, I very quickly go, I kind of bristle.
Next to newsobserver.com, where it says, for all its billion-dollar gyrations, the actual investment strategies behind a highly valued and hotly debated stock portfolio of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints appears to be a relatively staid affair. Analysis of the $54.7 billion stock fund managed by the Faith's investment arm, Ensign Peak Advisors, shows money managers have carefully steered those huge holdings to closely mirror the investment mix of a leading stock index known as the S&P 500, which tracks the performance of 500 of the largest publicly traded U.S. companies. The account has grown from a pandemic-related low of $29.9 billion at the start of 2020 to $54.7 billion at the end of June, an overall gain of about 83%, the Salt Lake Tribune reports. This fund is, of course, only a portion of the Utah-based church's overall wealth, representing the U.S. stocks it holds directly and is required to report. Let's take a pause here and read a brief snippet from the church's website, published in 2018, where it says, while recently traveling on the Africa continent, President Russell M. Nelson stated, we preach tithing to the poor people of the world because the poor people of the world have had cycles of poverty generation after generation. That same poverty continues from generation to another until people pay their tithing. It is living the law of tithing that will break the cycle of poverty. Those who live this law will join the millions of faithful members of the church who bear solemn and joyous testimony that the Lord keeps his promises to those who love him and keep his commandments. I testify to you that when I paid tithing, I had 10% less money. Back to the original article. According to one publicly reported estimate, Ensign Peak and affiliated funds manage investments on behalf of the global faith of 17.2 million members, worth a total of $179 billion to $205 billion. The Widows Might report, a website devoted to research and analysis of the church's financial holdings, also projects the church could be worth at least $1 trillion by 2044. In-depth looks at the portfolio since it began reporting to federal regulators in 2020 show that in hopes of beating the market, Ensign Peak managers have sometimes skewed the church's investments toward major stocks in the S&P 500 that they expect might perform better quarter to quarter. There also has been occasional evidence of more reactive trading, including a 2021 gambit on stock in video game retailer and social media darling GameStop that saw its initial $867,000 investment swell to $8.7 million in a matter of months. And as with the stock balance of the S&P 500 overall, Ensign Peak has dominant stakes in big technology firms such as Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and increasingly NVIDIA, maker of software and hardware integral to the proliferating field of artificial intelligence. Ensign Peak's overall approach, according to portfolio analysis that includes stock dividends as well as price fluctuations, has produced a revised 13.1% annualized return for the Salt Lake City-based fund since the end of 2019. By comparison, financial analysts with Widow's Might noted in updated figures the S&P 500 index produced yearly investor gains of 14.2% over that same time. In other words, had Ensign Peak managers invested in a vanilla S&P 500 index fund over the past 4+ years instead of spreading their portfolio over as many as 2,308 separate stocks, mutual funds, and other investments, they would have earned roughly $3 billion more than they did. That lag in performance, Widow's Might added, was potentially due to poor stock selection, off-kilter market timing, reactive or excessive stock trading or biases by managers towards certain investment styles or favoring some industries over others. Widow's Might said it suspected that Ensign Peak was in the process of reallocating its stake in U.S. stocks to other investments such as real estate, bonds, and private equity, possibly in anticipation of better returns. Based on a host of public financial disclosures, Church Reports stock and index data, and professional-grade analysis tools, researchers at the site estimate the Church's total wealth at about $265 billion at the end of 2023.
Good afternoon. Welcome to ABC4 News at 4 o'clock. I'm Sarah Murphy. We're following breaking news for you here. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints just announced that single men 40 and over with no dependents at home can now serve missions. The church says this new change will help more members reach their goal of serving a mission. They also note it may align with some of their life experiences more. Single women age 40 and older, they will see some assignment changes too. They are now allowed to serve at visitor centers, historic sites, as well as employment centers.
We are recreating Wicked this year for Halloween. Here is an update on my Elphaba look after last night's
You've got the side sewn to the front.
incident. After I messed it up, over 1,000 people sent me advice, and one of them was my new best friend, Riley, who has this crazy long-arm quilting machine.
This is so industrial.
She invited me over to use it and literally saved Halloween. It was a little bit scary, but luckily I didn't sew through my finger. This is the look I was going for with the recreation, and this is the look we were able to achieve using her quilting machine. All in all, I think it's pretty close. I still have a ton of work to do and not very much time, but we're getting there. Follow along and please let me know what you think.
In church news today, this Friday, November 1st. 40 years have passed since BYU was second to none. Lee Benson and Dick Harmon share their memories of that championship year and parallels being made to this year's Cougar football team and its chances to go all the way. During a BYU forum, Dallas Jenkins, the creator of the TV series The Chosen, gave an inside look at the journey of the show, overcoming failure, and his own spiritual path along the way. Elkin Jimenez of the Westchester, New York stake says everyone he knew in the Bronx speaks Spanish, so it was not easy for him to improve his English skills when he first moved to the New York City borough 7 years ago from the South American country of Colombia. Learn how the church's English Connect program helped Jimenez and others move forward.
Let's look at some of the best religiously themed memes that I've seen this week. Waiting for marriage doesn't mean the sex will be safe or the relationship will be healthy. This gem from The Naked Pastor, who is one of my favorite creators. Teaching kids to ask magical beings to solve their problems creates irresponsible adults who fail to find solutions. Sending thoughts and prayers. Another favorite of mine, Eric Sprinkle, says, hell isn't real, but orgasms are. Adjust your Sunday plans accordingly. This fabulous image of drag queen Jesus. this one that says it's called the Church of Satan, where they perform ritual human sacrifice and eat human flesh, to which someone responded, please don't confuse us with the Catholics. Drag queens pay taxes. Churches pay hush money. I need this one on a shirt. It just says planting seeds of rebellion, and it reminded me of in the Book of Mormon in Alma chapter 32, where we're counseled to plant a seed and see what it grows into. Lord, if the church isn't true, give me a sign. When a religious person says, don't believe everything you read. And my personal favorite. I wouldn't say I've ever been a magician, but once I pulled an entire religion out of my hat.
As I talk about the LDS Church's money and the greed of LDS Church leaders in stockpiling so much of it, I get this question a lot, sometimes sincerely, sometimes not, but always asking something to the effect of, why do they do it? Because they don't get these million-dollar paychecks like CEOs of similar mega-wealthy corporations. So why do they do it? I'd like to first point out that the amount that they do get in their paychecks is not a small amount. Their living allowance is probably more than 99% of the people watching this. I think the Widows' Mite report estimated that they get $178,000 a year now, plus free healthcare, plus a free vehicle, plus. It's not a small amount, but it is admittedly smaller than other CEOs of other mega wealthy corporations. So why do they do it? Well, a friend here on TikTok pointed out an apt comparison, especially right now as here in the US, we are having an election deciding who should be the next president. And one of the main presidential candidates is the former guy who wants to be the president again, even though he is 78 and mega wealthy. He won't make more money being president, so why does he want to do it? It's about control. I mean, he could even hand-pick someone to replace him who would do a better job than him, but just by virtue of being decades younger, he could even have his hand up his ass the whole time, controlling him, but he's not going to do that. He's not going to let go of control. LDS church leaders aren't like flying in private jets and living in these huge mansions, at least not that we know of. And yet they do have immense control over millions of people worldwide. They have immense control over a whole state. They practically control the state of Utah. They have immense control over whole industries. Look at how huge their for-profit companies are. Go look up Ag Reserves, Farmland Reserve, Property Reserve. They're huge companies that control the industries to a certain extent. It's not about their paychecks. It's about control.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.